So, where did it all begin? At some point, something triggered in your head, did it, or?
I think it triggered in my head probably when I was a teenager, but then sort of was dismissed fairly quickly afterwards. I started worked pretty much throughout my 20s.
What did you do?
I started working with Marks and Spencer's.
Oh yeah.
Did a management training course with them and worked with them for a number of years, and then left and worked a little bit with Oxfam in Bangladesh and did some travelling in Asia, and then worked with John Lewis, so again in the retail trade.
So so that life didn't really suit you then?
It didn't really. That sort of life was contrasted with a desire to travel, so I did a fair bit of travelling, and I think it was during the travelling that I recognised there to be some other things which were kind of lacking in my life, or in my ordinary life here in Britain. So when I came back from some of my travels, I started to ask questions about other forms of life, and religious life was mentioned.
I mean, you were always a Catholic.
I was born a Catholic, yes, and we were brought up in a traditional sort of Catholic environment. Yes.
But you weren't educated by the Jesuits.
I wasn't educated by the Jesuits, and I didn't really meet my first Jesuit until I was about 29, 30. I'd heard of Jesuits a little bit before, but had never really taken much interest or paid much attention.
What was it that attracted you about the Jesuits specifically?
I think the first time I met a Jesuit, I heard about the kind of work he was doing. And he was working with a group of marginalised young people, drug users. And at the same time, he told me he was a Catholic priest. And the two things didn't seem to go together. I was kind of really struck by a Catholic priest being able to, at the same time, identify to some extent with people who were sort of in that situation. And of course he told me he was a Jesuit priest, which then seemed to have a different sort of spirituality as well. And so it was a combination of the work he was doing, but also the spirituality of St. Ignatius.
Because, I mean, you could have been a Benedictine, or did you have a look at that, or did you consider other faiths?
I didn't really look at the Benedictines or any monastic orders. There was a sense that I wanted to be kind of pretty much engaged. I wanted to sort of be doing things. I didn't feel particularly called to a monastic way of life.
What is it specifically about the Jesuits then that you find attractive?
I find it, well, certainly I find attractive the notion that we try to be contemplative in action, which is a bit of a slogan, if you like, but St. Ignatius has this thing about trying to do things, trying to act out of a contemplation, I suppose, and trying to reflect on what you do and take that back into prayer. So there's this notion that action is not divorced from prayer or contemplation.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like that. I think it's very appealing, because there's a tendency for people to think that, you know, with the Benedictines and people, that, you know, you're hiding what use are you hiding
Yes.
away and you're praying every day in
Yes.
your monasteries.
Yes.
And that particularly attracted you.
It was a combination of that and also this notion of Ignatius again, that you find God in everything. And I think a little bit of my sort of, the images I had of priesthood and the images I had of being a priest in the church were that they were connected with the religious parts of life, whereas the Jesuits and the Jesuit way of looking at things seemed to be about finding God in everything, therefore in every part of life, not just the religious bits.
And the Jesuits' history and the Jesuits' things that the Jesuits, did nothing put you off about the Jesuits? I mean, the Jesuits didn't, you know, they've got a sort of history of being sort of involved in all sorts of things in the past. You know, none of that put you off, or actually maybe made you even more attracted to them.
Yes, I think partly because I didn't know an awful lot about Jesuit history, and I didn't really know an awful lot about what they had been involved with in the past or associated with. So I sort of came to get to know them when I was 29, 30, with a level of ignorance which in actual fact I think was not probably a bad thing. Because then once I started to read the stories and I started to listen to Jesuits talk about their experience, it all sounded wonderful, you know, that there was this kind of notion of doing great things for God. And normally those things were done within the ordinary, routine, daily life of everyday living.